Okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's Lunch and Learn. As we say, if it's Tuesday at Emmett, it must be our Lunch and Learn. And again, like we always say, that I welcome everybody's comments and insight on anything we discuss. And please feel free to jump in if you're listening live or if you're watching it later online. Feel free to leave a comment or send me a message, and I'd be happy to respond to it. So today we're doing a very interesting topic that particularly interests me, and it really deals with what the purpose of I guess really what the purpose of this world is all about, or mitzvot, everything in that respect. And I say that, we understand that the purpose of life is really to perfect ourselves, and to perfect ourselves in a way whereby our neshamot can relate to Hashem. In other words, if we're going to connect to Hashem for eternity, which is the purpose of this world, that we should earn that place, part of that ability to connect depends on how similar we are to Hashem. And in other words, in the spiritual world, similarity allows for there to be closeness. If a soul is not similar to Hashem, the closeness is diminished. If a soul can be more God-like, then there will be a greater fusion, as it were, if we could think in terms of those, in that type of language. And in fact, that's probably the greatest mitzvah we have in the Torah, which is to be holich bedrachav, to go in God's ways, to resemble Hashem, to act like Hashem, to transform our personality traits into what Hashem wants us to look like. How do we do that? So we have to understand what Hashem is. Hu rachum, He's compassionate. We have to be compassionate. He's merciful. We have to be merciful. Hu erech hapayim, He's slow to anger. We have to be slow to anger. The Yud Gimel Midot, as we speak about. And at the same time, we have to understand that the perfection of our personality really depends on how we conduct ourselves in every situation. And that's a refinement of self, which isn't just, an icing on the cake of Torah, as it were. It's really what the purpose of the Torah is. The purpose of the Torah being to work on ourselves, to perfect ourselves, to refine ourselves, and our actions have to demonstrate that in every situation. Now, sometimes in our lives, we know what to do in terms of action because we have a commandment. We know, for example, that if it's the night of Pesach, we're commanded to be eating matzah. Or we know that if we're going to eat bread, we're obligated to make a blessing, a motzi lachem min haaretz. Or for men, we're obligated in the morning to make sure we put on our tefillin, to daven. But there's that gray area of life, that part of life whereby we have to conduct ourselves in the way that God wants, yet it's not explicitly written as what to do. It's derived from how the Avot, how the Imahot, how Moshe Rabbeinu, how the great men of Tanakh conducted themselves. And the word we use for that is derech eretz. Derech eretz means proper conduct. And the Rambam writes, and I believe it's a Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam, that says you can't codify proper conduct because every situation is different. You can't codify midot, personality traits, because a personality trait is something which depends on the situation. It depends on the moment. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. For example, anger is something which obviously is forbidden, but there's a time when one needs to express anger, at least externally, in order to stand up for justice or whatever it might be. There's a time when humility is the right trait, where we have to say, I don't know, and you decide. And there's a time when false humility can cause the destruction of Jerusalem, as it says, that the Avnu Sasu, the humility of Zechariah ben Avkulas, destroyed the temple. He wouldn't decide what to do. He wouldn't basket. He wouldn't get involved. So every personality trait requires a measure. It requires thought. It requires the ability to know and think and analyze, is this the right personality trait for the situation? And that's why personality traits in the Torah are called midot. Midot, the Rambam calls his part of his section of halacha, which deals with really, I guess we talk about, human interaction. He calls it midot, which from the word mada, moded, meaning to measure. You have to measure it. Every situation, you have to analyze what's the appropriate ingredient, what's the measurement for that particular area. With that said, the way we understand really how to work on this part of ourselves, the self-perfection in action, and those areas of life which don't have explicit halachot, but require that thought of how am I supposed to behave, how am I supposed to conduct myself. The way we analyze that is we really look and the storylines in the Chumash or in Tanakh. And this is really where Hashem is giving us ideas and hints and saying, look, see. And that's one of the reasons that God actually communicates through stories. The Sefer Bereshis, Sefer Shmos is so filled with stories. And part of the stories, there's hidden halachas within, the halachas of midot, of proper conduct, of how to behave in certain situations. And the analysis of that, I think, is extraordinarily fascinating. And it gives us the tools that we need to really perfect our actions and our personalities in every area that we encounter. And that's what this world is all about, to perfect ourselves and to really take the raw material God gave us and give back a completed product. And as a result, be rewarded for that and achieve the closeness that we'll be able to achieve because we've made ourselves more godlike. So with that said by way of introduction, I'd like to focus just on one episode that in Parshas Bo, and just going to read from the verse for a moment, looking at chapter 10, verse 11 in Parshas Bo in Exodus, in Shmos, chapter 10, verse 11. So what's happening over here is that we're in the midst of the last three plagues. Parshas Bo, as we know, is the numerical value. Beit is 2, Aleph is 1, is 3, which actually is a hint that there are 3 plagues in Parshas Bo. And the last 3 plagues we know are Arba, locusts, and the Choshech, darkness, and Machos Bechoros, slaying the firstborn. We're going to look at the locusts for a moment, or an episode surrounding Moshe Rabbeinu's interaction with Paro concerning the plague of the locusts. So what happened? It says like this, that after the last plague of the Barad, so Paro's ministers, the people of his house, they all became nervous. It says, V'yomer avdei Pharaoh, Elov, the servants of Pharaoh said to him, Ad masai ki ezed lanu lemokesh. How long will they ensnare us? Shlach es anashim b'yavdu es Hashem Elokechem. He says, send forth the Jewish nation, send them out of Egypt. V'yavdu es Hashem Elokechem, let them serve their God. Atem teid ki avdu Mitzrayim, before Egypt is destroyed. So what happened? It says, V'yushav es Moshe ves Aaron al Paro. Moshe and Aaron were brought back to the palace. V'yomer lehem, and Paro said to them, L'chu, go. Idu es Hashem, go serve Hashem. Elokechem, your God. Umi holchim. And then Paro asked, and who's going with you? V'yomer Moshe, and Moshe says, B'nareinu b'sikneinu nelech. We're going with our children and our old people. We're all going. Ubaneinu noseinu, our boys and our girls. But tzolneinu b'chareinu, our sheep and our cattle, nelech. We're all going. We're all leaving. This is now the prelude to the 8th plague. I guess Paro has experienced enough for Moshe Rabbeinu. When he asked them who's going, he said, we're all going. It's not kidding around anymore. Why? Ki chag Hashem lanu, because it's a chag for Hashem. For Yomer lehem, and Paro says back to Moshe, Yechein, it should be so. Hashem imachem kasher hashelach eschem. God should be with you as I'm sending you. V'estapchem, and your little ones. Ru'u ki ra neged pneichem, and he adds a warning, but he said you should understand there's evil before your eyes. It says, and then what happens over here? Paro says, lo chen. Paro retracts. He says, lo chen. L'chuna gvarim v'idu Hashem. Go, let the men go forth and serve Hashem, their God, in this. Ki oso temivakshim, because that's what you're requesting. You're requesting to have a chag Hashem, some sort of celebration to Hashem. So the men should do it. In other words, Moshe's request was men, women, children, everybody. Pharaoh retracts. And he says, okay, let the men go. Then there's a pause in the verse, and it says something very startling. V'yigaresh Osam me'es pnei Pharaoh. And Moshe and Aaron, who was with them, were expelled from before the face of Pharaoh. V'yigaresh Osam me'es pnei Pharaoh. Now that's interesting. Well, just before I focus on it, just the next pasuk says, "V'yomer Hashem Moshe," and then Hashem says to Moshe, "The teyad chol haaretz, lift up your hand on the earth, on Eretz Mitzrayim, the land of earth, and the land of Egypt, be arba, and there's going to be locusts. V'yal al Eretz Mitzrayim, and these locusts went forth on Egypt. V'yochos koles of haaretz, and they ate up all the trees of the earth. Es kol asher hisha barad, anything that the hail had left over, the locusts went and in a massive swarm." And something which was never seen before. The arba, the locusts went out. But what I'd like to focus on is the sentence that preceded that. Again, what happened in the story? Moshe comes to Paro. We're after the end of the plague of the hail. We're going to the 8th plague, just before the 8th plague. One more request. Let the Jewish people go forth. Who's going? We're all going. Everybody. Our men, our women, our old people, our young people. We're taking all our sheep, our cattle. Everyone's going. And there's a legitimate request. Chag Hashem. We're all going to serve Hashem. And then there's a change of heart. And Paro says, no, I don't want that. Let the men go. The men are the ones that you were requesting from before. You want to serve Hashem, take the men. But the children aren't going, the old people, the women, it's only the men. There's a pause in the verse. V'yigaresh Osam me'es pnei Paro. And it says that Moshe and Aaron were expelled from before the face of Paro. Yigaresh. Now, Yigaresh is a very strong word. Expelled, Yigaresh. For example, the word we might be familiar with is gerushin. Gerushin means a divorce. To megaresh, gerushin is a very sad word. Gerush. Someone who's a gerushin is the idea of somebody really separating off from something. Gerushin, expelling. They were expelled from the house of Paro. Yigaresh Osam me'es pnei Pharaoh. Just looking at Rashi for a second on that, Yigaresh Osam, Rashi says, Harizeh Lashon Katzar, v'lo piresh mi megaresh. It doesn't say who the Megaresh was, who expelled them, just that they were expelled from the house of Pharaoh. It's a strong word. It implies almost like a physical picking up and throwing out. It's a very harsh word. And it's a very surprising word. And this is really where I want to build our discussion on. It's a surprising word. Why is it surprising? Well, it's surprising because Pharaoh had just seen 7 plagues up till now. Plagues which were absolutely devastating. For the fact that the water turned to blood, plague number 1, and there was nothing to drink. Miraculous. And you had to buy water from Klal Yisrael to get water. The only way to get it. Sephardeia, the infestation of frogs in everything. We went through plagues of Dever, where the animals died. We went through plagues of shrin, boils, where lice, the hail which destroyed. Egypt has been devastated now. 7 plagues have been enacted on the land and against the people. Clearly, Moshe and Aaron are absolutely in control over here. And, as can be seen really, by the beginning of the verse also, that, that it says at the beginning of this verse, it says that Moshe and Aaron came to the palace. V'yavo Moshe and Aaron al Paro v'yomer love. When he comes again, let my people go. They seem to walk into the palace of their own volition, of their own strength. Didn't need an invitation. And it shows what type of control they had. They were feared. And that's when the servants of Pharaoh turned to Pharaoh and said, listen, let them go. We can't take this anymore. And Pharaoh agrees. So he tells his servants, Vayushav es Moshe es Aaron. He said, call them back, bring them back here. He brings them back. And they make the request. Who's going? He says, everybody. Pharaoh changes his mind and says, no, only the men. And then that very strong language, Vayigarish Osam, and Moshe and Aaron are expelled, perhaps even bodily, picked up and thrown out of the palace. So how could that be? Here's the question. How can that be that they were expelled in such a way? They were clearly in control. They were clearly, had the upper hand. Pharaoh had seen 7 plagues. Why would Moshe and Aaron allow themselves the indignity, the disgrace of being thrown out? So, in order to understand this, we're going to jump into the Rivah. The Rivah was one of the Bali Tosfos. The Bali Tosfos, we know, were basically the grandchildren of Rashi in about the 1200s, writing in France, parts of Germany. And the Rivah was one of the Bali Tosfos. So this is a Perush that goes back over 800 years. And obviously, in terms of Jewish scholarship, very, very authoritative, and therefore their insight is something which we value very, very much so. In learning, we're always looking backwards. Why is that? Because anyone who's closer to the giving of Torah at Har Sinai has a greater connection to the wisdom of Torah, and understands things in a deeper way than we do. If we could see things clearly, it's only because we could stand on the shoulders and look ahead. But those who are closer, we're always looking backwards. We're always looking at the generation behind us. What did they say? What did the generation before that say? They were closer. If they didn't think of it, they didn't say something. Why are we bringing something new that they didn't see? So when we have what we call a Rishon, one of the Rishonim, those who wrote from the year 1000 to about 1400, again, their words are so authoritative because their depth of understanding of Torah was much greater than ours. So the Rivah says as follows. The Rivah, and it says, one of the Bali Tosos, it says, V'yigarish Osam, and Moshe and Aaron were expelled from the palace. So he says, Tema. He goes, I'm in wonder. Lam iklu chochach l'tzeis mibeis Paro. Why did they hang around so long? Why did they delay leaving the house of Paro? Shechutzrak legarshem. That it was necessary to expel them. If Pharaoh said no, what should they have done? They should have turned around and walked out. Why were they in a position where they were delaying, that's his question, whereby Pharaoh had to almost like physically have his henchmen come and throw them out? Doesn't say how he did it exactly, but V'yigaresh is a strong language of expulsion. V'yesh lomar, and here's the answer that he gives. Shesholach paro shaliach lahashivim. We have to remember the original part of the story. How did Moshe and Aaron arrive at the palace to begin with? Well, let's go back for a moment and just take a look for a second. At the beginning of Parshas Bo, as we mentioned, it begins after the plague of the hail, which Moshe and Aaron come to the palace, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he wouldn't listen. And Moshe and Aaron make a request, and they say, let our people leave, go serve Hashem. And it says that Pharaoh refuses. So they leave. They go out. Then what happens? The people turn to Pharaoh, his servants, his ministers, and they say, they're destroying us. We can't take this anymore. Let them go. And Pharaoh has a change of heart right there. And he agrees. And listen to what the verse says in verse 8. Vayushav es Moshe es Aaron al Pharaoh. Vayushav means, and he brought them back. Yushav. He returned them. He caused them to come back. He invited them back into the palace. It's the only time we see that. He invited them back. Yushav es Moshe es Aaron. Meaning, what does that mean? He must have sent his servants, go get Moshe and Aaron, and bring them back. For Yushav. It says, Rashi tells us, they were brought back through a messenger that was sent after them. And they were brought back to Paro. So listen to what the Ritva says. And what I'm going to say right now is something I feel is absolutely remarkable. The question that the Riva is dealing with is, why did they allow themselves to be hanging around so long that they needed to be expelled? If Pharaoh said no, they should have just, buttoned their coats, turned around, says, listen, it's your funeral. it's your loss. We're leaving. God will take care of another plague. But they didn't do that. They stood there and they waited. And that's his question. Why were they standing there and waiting? I hope I made the question really clear. I found in my teaching over the years, that there's nothing more interesting than the answer to a question that bothers you. There's nothing more boring than the answer to the question that you never asked. So before we give an answer, we have to make sure the question is so bothersome. So the question bothersome? Why did they allow themselves to be thrown out of the palace? Why didn't they just leave? That's the question. So listen again what the Riva says. He said, V'yigarish Osam, Tema. Lama ikul chochach that says me Paro. Why did they delay so long from leaving the house of Pharaoh? Shehutzrak l'garashem. That it was necessary to expel them violently or bodily. V'yishlom, where the answer is, Sheshalach Paro shaliach lahashivim, because Paro had sent a messenger to bring them back. Remember what happened? For Yushav. They had been invited back into the palace. For Al-Kain, lo rotzli pater mimenu, ad sheyiten lahem rishos. Therefore Moshe and Aaron understood, we can't leave the palace unless Pharaoh gives us permission. Lo rotzli pater mimenu ad sheyiten lahem rishos. We can't leave until we get permission. Why is that? Because in proper conduct, in derech eretz as we call it, there's a halacha. What's the halacha? If you're a guest in someone's home, you're not allowed to leave until your host gives you permission. That's proper conduct. When someone invites you as a guest, proper conduct is you just don't leave. You have to wait until the host allows you to leave. That's refined behavior. That's respect for a host. Moshe and Aaron felt, we're bound by that. We were invited back to the palace by Pharaoh. So in essence, the first time he did that, he invited us in. We're his guests, as it were. If we're his guests, granted he's changed his mind about what he wants to do. He's no longer agreeing to our request, but we're still his guests. And therefore we're not allowed to leave unless he gives us permission to leave. It would be a violation of proper conduct. Let me continue to read. He says, I'm reading to you now from Chidushi Halev, which is a sefer written based on the Sichot, and we call the Shmuzim, of Rav Chanuk Leibovitz, who was my Rebbe and was the prominent and well-known Rosh Yeshiva of Chavetz Chaim for over 50 years. So he says, Bior Devarim Hu. So the explanation is as follows. Shekan Kashal Moshe Aaron. There's a question of Moshe and Aaron. It says, Shebachachmosim Gadol Halohi Vinu Shapar Yigarshem. Moshe and Aaron were such wise people, such intelligent people. Didn't they know that if they're going to stand there too long, that Paro is going to violently expel them? So why didn't they just leave before they were expelled? So Shaharei they say Yimnu me Albon Shal Girush. They would have saved themselves the disgrace of being kicked out that way. Vaterotzes, the answer is she became in Shaparo Biksha Lavo, since Paro requested of them that they come. Ein ze midas derech eretz that says bli nesinas reshuso. It would be a violation of derech eretz, of proper personality traits, of proper conduct, to leave without his permission. V'tzrichem anu lomer, and we need to say, shederech eretz kodma be'eineim yosem eminias bizyona, that having proper personality traits, conducting themselves in this refined fashion, in this proper way of showing proper respect to a host, was more important in their eyes than their own disgrace. Shoy Moshe v'Aaron they chose to fulfill this quality of proper personality traits. Even though they knew where this is going to lead to. They knew if they're going to stand there, they are going to be embarrassed, humiliated, insulted, expelled. V'imza, what do we learn from this? We know that a person is always obligated to be so concerned with their own self-dignity. That's an important concept that we have. One's own sense of self is something we don't ignore. And I believe we've given different classes on it, and perhaps we'll review it in a class going forward. Self-respect, our personal dignity, is something crucial, because we don't respect ourselves. We're not going to strive for the greatness God wants from us. And especially a Talmid Chacham, someone who represents Torah, someone who represents Hashem, a sage, a great rabbi like Moshe and Aaron. They represent God. To do something which causes their humiliation, it's not just a violation of their own honor. They represent the Almighty. It's a violation of God's honor. So what's happening? In their mind, they weighed all of this. Our own self-respect, God's honor, and yet on the other side was, how do I conduct myself? Proper personality traits. And Moshe and Aaron, in their brilliance and wisdom, two of the greatest thinkers in human history, understood the proper action here is we have to conduct ourselves in a way in which we don't violate this principle of not leaving a host without permission. Hechlida Moshe v'Aaron shekedai lem l'seisatz atzman lehitbayesh. They had to, they said to themselves, we're obligated to be embarrassed. Ubad shelo yifku ubamidas derech eretz, rather than violate proper personality traits. Let's think, we could think this through just for a moment and see what comes out of this and practically in our lives. In this enormous weighing in the situation, they're in a situation. On the one hand, we're going to be embarrassed. It's going to be humiliating. It's going to reflect badly on God even, because we represent Hashem. We're His teachers. We're we communicate through for Him, which they do. And the other hand is, well, if we're guests in the house of Paro because he invited us, and to leave without permission would be a violation of what we call derech eretz, the proper personality traits in that situation. They went through the mental calculation. They weighed it, they analyzed it, and they came to the conclusion that we cannot violate proper personality traits. Now, just that conclusion that they went through indicates to what extent Moshe and Aaron understood that God values proper conduct, how we behave, what we do. In the smallest of situations, what's the correct thing to do? How do I elevate myself? Who am I supposed to be right now? Even though I'm going to be humiliated. But I can't violate that proper conduct. So in their estimation and their assessment of how important it is to conduct ourselves properly, we see on which side which side of the line they ended up on. So therefore, the obligation to work on developing an approach to life where we're asking ourselves the question, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing in the situation? Am I conducting myself properly? Am I behaving properly? Am I saying the right words? Am I perfecting my personality to have the right mode of expression? You know, it's very interesting. Just as to understand this, it says in Pirkei Avos, it says one thing. It says to mikabel is kol adam b'sever panim yafos. Supposed to greet everybody with a sever panim yafos, with a pleasant countenance, is the kind of the loose translation of it. But mikabel kol adam, receive people b'sever panim yafos, with a face which is pleasant. Make people feel good in your presence. Make them, cheer them up. It's interesting. The word it says it offers enormous insight. It says b'sever panim yafos. Saver in Hebrew, the word saver means from the word svara. The svara is from the word, the spor means logic, thought. For example, a person has a good idea, it's a good svara, a good piece of logic. So our rabbis are communicating something very interesting by using that word. Mikabel kol adam b'sever panim yafos. Before you make your face, use your mind to understand what expression I should use. A happy expression isn't always the proper expression. The person might be sad. The person might be bothered by something, and to come with just a cheerful countenance is not what he needs. The expression he needs is a look of concern. The other person, it's a simcha, it's a joyous occasion. Oh, the thought process has to be, this person needs a very happy smile. Why? Because I want to help them feel the joy of their joyous moment. Or sometimes a person, God forbid, might be mourning, and you have to receive them, but within a very dignified way, pleasant but dignified, respecting the space. So every moment requires thought. What does God want from me? What's the conduct? What part of my personality do I need to be developing? And Moshe and Aaron understood, one point in Derech Eretz, one aspect of proper personality traits is, I can't leave until my host gives me permission. I'll be humiliated, be embarrassed. What can I do? There's a halach. There's a demand for proper traits. That's another side, and we can't violate that. I remember one time I'm merited to have a great uncle, a great aunt, a lot of my German uncles and aunts who came over from Germany, been in the late 30s, and this particular uncle and aunt came over after the war. They were in England during the war, and they died at the age of 103. And I always enjoyed watching the way they conducted themselves. Old world elegance, old world conduct. I think my uncle probably never picked up a piece of pizza to eat it. That would be in his mind, a violation of dignity. Probably cut it with a fork and knife if he ever ate it. And I remember one time I had them in my home. They were at our house and having a meal with us. And I remember he just kept staying and staying and staying. And then finally, when I made a move to get up, he stood up immediately and realized, okay, well, thank you, we have to leave. And I realized the mistake I had made. I assumed that because of his age and the way I had such respect for him, he was going to tell me when he needed to leave. I was a young person, and he was waiting for me to give him the signal, it's time to leave, because he was the guest, I was the host. That's this Derech Eretz. Now, I'm going to ask one question on this, and this is a question that I heard my Rosh Yeshiva ask, and Panik Leibovitz. And the question is like this, but wait a minute. What's going on over here? Maybe Moshe and Aaron really aren't doing the right thing. It's true, Derech Eretz, proper conduct, is so important. But one does have to be concerned with the honor of God. We represent Hashem. To disgrace us is to disgrace Hashem. Because if we're His teachers, when you disgrace us, it doesn't look good for God. We can't let God be disgraced. So maybe we say, granted, I will be violating Derech Eretz by leaving and not being thrown out, but I have no choice because I have to stand up for the honor of God. So I remember hearing my Rosh Yeshiva comment on this and saying, it must be that it would be a greater disgrace of God's honor if his teachers violated proper conduct. In other words, a violation of Derech Eretz would have been the greater disgrace for God than having themselves physically thrown out of the palace. And maybe we have to say that, otherwise it's not so clear they would have chosen to be thrown out if it meant disgracing God's name because they represented God. The greater violation of God's honor is when those who represent him don't act properly. Because if one's life is devoted to knowing God and relating to God and understanding what Hashem is all about, just as Hashem's actions are perfectly and purposely measured with the most beauty, everything Hashem brings to this world and does, if our actions don't reflect that, it speaks badly about the Creator. So they realized, if we're going to violate this area of proper conduct, that would be the greater disgrace to God than to have ourselves thrown out of the palace. So just something I just think we should think about as we go forth in our weekend is this idea a little bit of what it means to refine our personality. Derech Eretz Kidma, the Torah says in Pirkei Avos, that proper personality traits, proper refinements is the prerequisite to getting to know God, studying Torah. It's the purpose of life and the prerequisite to all wisdom. To know what Hashem wants, we have to be working on ourselves, we have to be working on our humility, we have to be working on developing parts of ourselves that can be more other-centered, to love more, to fulfill commandments like the after the Recha to love. If we're not refining ourselves, we're not going to understand what God wants from us. And ultimately, if we're not refining ourselves, we're not going to be capable of the ultimate gift which God wants us to have, which is that closest to Him. Because as we mentioned, in the spiritual world, closeness is a function of similarity. So I wish everybody a wonderful week, and to take this message to heart a little bit as we go forth in our week, and to do what we can to think in every situation, am I conducting myself with conduct that's refined and elevated, elegant, as befits somebody who's created in the image of God? I wish everybody a good week. Thank you.